Hi and welcome to Transformers, a program specially designed to talk to HR professionals, professionals whose life and work exemplify typical HR, technical HR, and brings out the best in organizations. Today we have with us a person who's gone through many types of topics and subjects in HR, but Dilrukshi Kurukulasuriya, General Manager HR, Diesel and Motor Engineering PLC. Hi and welcome to the program.
Hi, Niroshan.
It's lovely to have you with us. Dilrukshi, we've taken many subjects. We've had good professionals talk to us about culture, training and development, so many different types of subjects. It was a very interesting topic for us to take this entire chunk of talking about succession planning and leadership, because many use definitions and talk about it. Very rarely do they spend time on working at it. So perhaps to begin with, take us through, in your thoughts, what are the building blocks of this entire process?
Okay, I think you hit the nail when you said, the organization spend very little time on succession planning. Yes, there are a lot of definitions for succession planning. For me, it is a systematic approach towards building up the pipeline of leadership for an organization. And what is important is this process identifies the critical positions of an organization, where it should not be vacant for a long time or should be filled by a mediocre person, but with the professional and person with a lot of experience which really competent in that job.
Sure.
So that is my understanding of succession planning. And yes, as you said, a lot of companies do not spend enough time. I know, HR professionals try their best to, roll out a lot of programs in order to, be in line with their objectives and, to do a good job. But I don't think, it is only the job of HR people to, drive this. Yeah, you just asked, what are the building blocks? I believe the stakeholder buy-in is the most important.
Okay.
Why it is important is there are certain factors also certain prerequisites also have to be there in order to roll out a succession planning program. I mean, planning is just one step in the whole process of succession planning, and we will say succession management basically. Right. Planning is just the beginning, and of course there are a lot of other steps coming afterwards. I believe that the prerequisite for start succession planning in an organization is the organization or the top management has to have a long-term vision. I think without a vision or a long-term strategy being present, I don't think there's any opportunity to start a succession planning process.
Okay.
So it is very important. I think the building blocks of succession planning is, yes, there should be a long-term vision for the organization. There should be commitment and buy-in from the stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, what I meant was these days the most important responsibility of the board of directors, the executive directors, is to mitigate the business risk.
Okay.
So if if they believe succession planning mitigate the business risk, and even as HR professionals, if we can if we can convince that this is a process where it is linked with the strategy,
sure.
I think that will build a very, very strong building block for succession planning.
Absolutely.
And also I feel that there should be competency, in-house competency also to identify all this, even the HR professionals also have to be competent, and when we are rolling out or when we plan succession for future, we also have to convince why it is important, and then being very transparent. We have to have correct tools for identifying high potentials or the candidates for succession planning. I think these are some of the, there are many more, but I think these are some of the main building blocks of succession planning.
Sure, sure. Dilrukshi, to go into more granular aspects of it, many say to me, succession planning is very hard because we don't analyze the job properly. We most often look for a successor as a person, not necessarily a job. So you are looking for, I am looking for a replacement in case so and so leaves the organization. We actually don't look at succession planning from the viewpoint of clarity and the job. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that is basic, Niroshan, because that is where most of us go wrong, and a lot of organizations go wrong in succession planning because, as I said, when we just had a conversation, we do have nice plans drawn, and we have organizational charts with names in it, but yes, even I have been thinking whether these really work. Why it is when there's a process of succession. So at the planning stage, when we have to identify what are the critical or most important jobs in an organization, and you need to see what are the core competencies required to carry out that job. But the succession planning we do for the future. So we can't just look at the person who is sitting in that job right now and replicate him or to develop those skills. That is one. Because we are doing it for the future, one thing we need to understand the organization vision, the strategy, and also where they are going to be investing.
That's right.
And also for an example, certain technologies will be obsolete, certain new skills will be needed for the future. So when we really plan succession planning, we need to look at required core competencies for the present job and also for the future.
Absolutely.
And then also it's not just, this is planning, but when you are executing, you need to have good set of tools, good set of development plans to really bring in these competencies into the, to inculcate in the candidate. And the other thing is whatever the, training that you give to a candidate, I believe, and I also the researchers have established, 70% of knowledge comes from on-the-job training, right? 20% is learned from experience from another person, and only 10% is what we can really give in terms of training, classroom training or books or videos or whatever mediums. So, but where we go wrong is we are more focused on 10% and we forget about 90%, which is very important, right? 70% of the knowledge comes on the job. So if you are shadowing somebody, if you really want to have a candidate to succeed a certain job role, I think that person have to work with the job holder for a long time. Some time, because succession planning, we are talking at least 2 to 3 years.
That's right.
Right? And then other thing learning, the tacit knowledge. Training is one thing, but tacit knowledge is that knowledge, the experience which is within the job holder or already holding the position. So it's very difficult to get that out of him and him or her. One reason is like, sometimes most of these job holders are not very comfortable having like, candidates for the job.
Of course.
And so like, they don't allow smooth transition.
That's right.
Because they want to, I don't know, like, there's a word that you call that like, princess mind or whatever. They want to, be the person and like, everyone to remember like, at, his time it was like this, now it's not. So, that certain people have like, certain mindsets. So, I think these are a few, derailers.
Sure.
For succession planning.
Sure.
I don't know whether I deviated from your question.
No, very much within.
I think these are some of the reasons for succession planning to go wrong in organization.
Okay. I'll probably talk a few factors within that entire subject itself. It was interesting that you were talking about shadowing and how people feel they might be replaced, and therefore their reluctance to be able to give out that tacit knowledge. The whole program covering and revolving around they are going to the next level, them finding better places, that entire process and communication becomes that much more important, and HR is right at the heart of that. How important is it for someone to feel I am building my next in line, and how does that happen with regard to HR?
Very good question, Niroshan. Yes, like, it is like, I think in this whole process, communication plays a major role,
Yes.
right? We have to be very transparent with like, all our stakeholders, and like, we have to build that trust, because like, why, like, most of the time where we go wrong is like, first we look at the most senior positions. Beyond that, they don't see like, a place where they can go into. Right. So like, they try to hold on to that, like, ideally, like, these, the critical positions are not necessarily the top positions.
No.
Because like, in our organization, when we look at succession planning, we look at two aspects.
Okay.
One is like, we look at like, what are the most critical positions exposed to the customer.
Good.
Right?
Okay.
And then other aspect, like, more often, like, the support services are forgotten. No? Yes. They think only the business positions are very critical.
Yes.
So sometimes only the CEO.
That's right.
Or else, like, the business leaders. But like, we look at both this, because like, if there is no proper support services, or like, you say shared services, like, this business process cannot be very efficient. So we look at customer critical job roles, and also like, process critical. And then like, we look at the incumbents, and that is how like, we plan it.
Sure.
I wouldn't say like, we are quite there, but we have started and we have some process. And yes, now this is like, when a candidate is identified for a position, like, the job holder feels little insecure, no? Because they think like, okay, now in few months time or whatever, somebody will be ready for my job. So like, my importance will go off.
Sure.
So like, what we need to do is, yes, we need to build a path for them as well, to see like, where they are going from here, and also make them comfortable saying like, this is for the future. It is not like, to replace you. Yes. Right? If in case like, there is a drop dead situation tomorrow, or like, to reinforce this, like, managers or the leaders need to start with the end mind. Like, they have to think that, I have to leave this position one day. And like, this truth, I mean, whether it is like, retirement or separation or promotion or whatever, like, they need to understand. And like, I think as HR professionals also, we have to like, encourage this behavior, like, to exit very gracefully.
Absolutely.
So like, as gracefully as they came in, I think they should be ready to leave gracefully.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
So we need to appreciate this behavior, we need to reinforce it, and we have to be very, very open about it.
Sure.
So I think it is about
Organizational sense, people say if you rely too much on tacit knowledge and not on process, there is a risk where the company feels it's on the individual, not on the process. So to what degree, and this varies from industry to industry. The more service oriented industries, it will be probably more than others. But from your experiences, can process driven methodology replace tacit knowledge?
I know why you're asking this question. I know, like, you are a frequent visitor to our Mercedes workshop, and I know, like, most of the customers look for a specific person because, like, that is, I mean, we are an ISO company.
Yes.
And, like, I think we are bad thing because, like, we also encourage people to, I mean, our employees to make good relationships because we are very customer oriented organization. But also we start with the premise that no one is indispensable.
Okay.
So we do not rely on people too much because all our processes, the work studies, everything is documented and, like, followed, and, like, those are, like, audited and all that. So, it is a very individualistic thing, like, people feel, like, customers feel if that person is not there, my thing will not get done.
That's
but it is not so. It is not so. Like, no one, I mean, we work in the premise that no one is indispensable in the organization.
Good, good. I also probably asked that question because the risk to the organization when you have individual giving that much of comfort, it's a nice thing while the business is happening, but in the light of the subject we are talking about in terms of succession planning, you sometimes cannot replicate that bond between the internal process and necessarily that personality outside. So how does, that's why I asked that question.
That's correct, Niroshan. That is why I said shadowing is very important. I think like, you can't like, get somebody to step in job holders' shoes at once.
Sure.
So like, for a long time, that's why I said like, 70% of the knowledge, experience come on the job. So like, and also the 20% comes from after like, working with that person.
Yes.
So like, now this is the basis. Now we have to get the candidate to work with the job hold for a long time and then get exposed to their customers and like, slowly build trust and like, that relationship, like, to replace that relationship in a manner which like, they will see like, anybody in the organization can step into the job holder's shoes.
Sure.
Does it answer your question?
Yes. And Niroshan, we have many of our listeners are youngsters and they are looking out there. They want to hear us HR people talk about all these processes and how they fit into this entire process, because like you said, if 70% is on the job and a great percentage after that is tacit knowledge, these youngsters are coming with that 10 to 20% or whatever, that small fraction of knowledge. How do they fit into this entire plan?
Well, I think I know like, worldwide now they say like, the employees have to manage their career.
Yes.
But I don't quite agree with that, because like, unless otherwise that prerequisites are there, there is no way that any employee can manage their careers in an organization.
Okay.
So it's very important that, okay, whether we tell these youngsters to manage your careers in the workplace, we need to give them tools.
Sure.
We need to give them a lot of knowledge. We have to tell them like, where we are going. In the first place, we have to tell like, what is our long-term vision if an organization has one. And like, what will be the competencies which will be required for future.
Sure.
And where we are investing.
Sure.
That is very important. So then only youngster,
Yes.
and especially these millennials, like,
Okay.
they're very, very hungry, very thirsty to know. So like, we need to have this, all this information out there.
Okay.
So especially like, the business plans where we are investing, all this information has to go to them. Then only they can take good career decisions.
Sure.
And also like, what happens is more often when they can't elevate themselves or else so when they can't move around in the organization, they leave.
Sure.
So, I know that organizations spend a lot of time in recruiting.
Sure.
We do that. We know that there's a huge short supply of talent when it comes to good talent. So, like, we need to retain this good talent that we have taken in.
Sure.
So, as managers, even managers have to play a very huge role there. Like, sometimes they're very departmentalized.
Sure.
Like, they build their
silos.
Silos and like, work in silos. So,
Yeah.
they don't want, if there is no opportunity in that business unit or the department, they don't think about the whole organization to retain this talent. So, this talent can mobilize, like, you can
Sure.
use it elsewhere. So, I think one thing like, it is educating managers and like, building their capacity.
Sure.
And this information also have to go out there.
Sure.
To the candidates. That is one. And also like, there are a lot of things that we can also do in-house. Like having talent pools, identifying high potentials, and like, if you really want to retain them, like, be very open about it, and like, give opportunities to apply and like, get into the talent pool and like to go through that fast track.
Sure.
So I think these are certain things that the company has to provide in order for the youngsters to manage their careers.
Sure.
So then they can take a decision like where they are going when this information is out there. Otherwise, I don't think there is any possibility for them to take any career decision.
Absolutely. From youngsters to more professionals who've been in the business for a long time. Out of the many tools, Dilrukshi, people talk about this 9-box matrix.
Yes.
And of course, 9-box talks about one area being performance and the other one being potential.
Yes.
And one day there was this guy that walked up to me, a person who's been in the business for a long time, and he says, my key performance indicators are very high, and therefore in terms of performance, I'm at the absolute peak. And I looked at this guy and said, well, if it is your key performance indicators, that means you have performed your current role well. And therefore, we can only expect that which is maybe some of these extras, but you've done well in your job. That does not mean that you're ready to get to the next job. Maybe I was talking out of turn. What do you think?
Absolutely. This happens very often in organization, and however much you try to, sometimes managers also understand, they think their best performers are the best potential candidates for leadership positions. And especially, I think this happens in sales-oriented business units.
Okay.
I mean, yes, there are stars, right? If you take the 9-box metrics where performance are concerned, they are in the top.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect, as you said, that we need to look at. The potential. It is that's very, very important. But you can't just place somebody in the 9-box metrics coming out of nowhere. So there's a process.
Right.
I mean, what we do is we address this in the performance management system itself, because I mean, we use that to, one thing, use people effectively and efficiently, and also to make them understand what is expected out of them.
Okay.
I mean, and also that also addresses what are their aspirations.
Okay.
And this performance management system addresses their outcomes, and inputs and outcomes. That is the objectives area, and also certain competencies.
Okay.
Right? We have, in our context, we have identified certain competencies which are very important to certain levels.
Sure.
So, these, apart from the objectives, these competencies are also taken into consideration when in the evaluation process.
Sure.
So, we rate these competencies in 1 to 5 scale.
Okay.
And what we say is 4 is very good for the present job.
Sure.
Right? So, somebody who is obtaining 4 for a certain competency is good for the present job. 5 is much more than that.
Okay.
Now, these competencies are leadership competencies.
Okay.
So, we are looking at the metal
Sure.
of a person, what, as you said, when we look at performance, we are looking at the outcome, which is very, very important.
Sure.
Achievement, outcome, very, very important. But sometimes these stars cannot really manage people, they can't manage other resources.
Sure.
So, it's very important to give lot of prominence to this area, but more often what I have seen is even organizations appreciate the outcome, and they also elevate people who only perform.
Sure.
Which is a mistake, and also that there's a reason behind that, because they want to also retain them.
Sure. Of course.
Yes. So there's no other way that you can retain them also. Okay, you can parallelly, enrich their job or
Job,
do
yes.
whatever, but I don't think they should be placed in leadership positions.
All right.
You can't put that ultimate, you can't place them in that ultimate box.
That's right.
In the matrix.
That's right.
So we have to be very, very careful in assessing people for leadership. So the core competencies for the present job and especially looking at future
Sure.
is very, very important. And how you do is up to you.
That's
But
right.
I think that has to be addressed through the performance evaluation system.
Yeah.
I think that would be an appropriate mechanism to do. Because I think always this 9-box matrix and the evaluation system is pretty much connected. I mean, that is how you just shift from performance evaluation system to 9-box.
Sure.
But it is not only, if it is only addressing performance, I don't think it is relevant.
Absolutely.
But it also has to address other areas such as the aspirations, the competencies,
Yeah.
and the potential.
Yeah. This is very important because many who are out there know sure.
I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
Of course.
And then, I think he started thinking.
Yes.
But he said otherwise he will not come back.
Sure.
So
To make a
I
point.
had to make a decision, and yes. So I mean, it was not my place also to. I mean, I was responsible, but I kind of had to oblige
Absolutely.
because this is a business necessity.
Yes.
So there are a lot of
There are
situations like that. Okay, but one thing as a HR, even though I'm HR person, I'm very, very flexible when it comes to business. yes, there are concepts, there are processes, but still I give lot of room for business necessities.
Absolutely.
Like, even it is not 100% complying, it is not because I am weak,
Sure.
right? But I sometimes I understand that there are business necessities. Like, whatever we do as HR professionals, we have to understand there is a business to run.
Absolutely.
And we are like, only facilitating it, right? So we are not there to just implement the best HR practices in an organization.
Yes.
It is only relevant if it helps the business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Interesting, because Dave Ulrich was down recently, and we had just about every HR professional there. And he asks this fundamental question. So, HR professionals, tell me, who is your customer? And with a lot of zest, all the HR professionals go, employees of the organization. And he says, nope, the customer of the business
Absolutely.
is who we are serving prime. So therefore, it all comes together with your thought process. When we are talking about leadership and planning in terms of succession, family businesses, right now in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of family businesses. And at times, we wonder, do they have a successor? And we almost feel sorry because certain very large organizations, they may not have that succession, maybe not in terms of family, but even the next person. It's very, very hard to think of a next person. And its implication, I think, on Sri Lanka long term is huge. So these organizations, you can see when they mature and the business leaders mature, so they make it public quoted, hoping that something will survive. And isn't that sad? So when you think of succession planning in terms of family businesses, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in such business.
Okay.
Currently, the business is run by the founder father's children.
Okay.
I think at least, all founder fathers' children are directors of the organization, but the chairman, the CEO are like, founder father's children, and there's another that is Mr. Pandithage's. Mr. Ranjit Pandithage is the chairman, and Mr. Ganath Pandithage is the group CEO. They are brothers.
Okay.
Right? And then we have another executive director who is the son of founder father, that is Mr. Algama. And these are all professionals.
Sure.
All of them are professionals. And but I think our organization is run in a more, very professional manner. We have a lot of other professionals in the board,
Sure.
right? As executive directors and also as non-executive directors. I think we have some of the best people in the country as independent directors in our board. So this company, when it comes to culture, I feel that this is a family-owned company because it is so warm.
Okay.
Because I also have worked in a couple of places, but you feel really at home at this company, because actually I'm going to talk about this tomorrow because we are also, Demo is also recognized as one of the great places to work in Sri Lanka for the second time also.
Sure.
So I'm supposed to do a presentation, and what I thought, when I thought about the culture, what is important is certain values that the founder fathers inculcated.
All right.
It still continues.
Okay.
And there were no HR professionals or management gurus to run the company in certain manner. But there are very nice values inculcated which are still continuing, even with their children and also with other directors, because the leadership reinforce these behaviors, the values, so that culture is still there, and it is so warm, and that is why we call our team the tribe.
Okay.
We call it the demo tribe,
Okay.
because because there are a lot of many traditions, certain programs, certain values, certain behaviors, almost coming for 75 years. We are 75 years this year, and those are still present and we still value. But when it comes to business, we don't mix these two.
Sure. Sure.
We are very clear in what is expected from employees, what are their deliverables, and there's a very clear process of running the business.
Okay.
So, and you said how the succession, now see the founder fathers children are there, and now the next generation is also there, if you but there is no guarantee. Now say my chairman Mr. Ranjit Pandithage, his son is also in the organization, but he started from the beginning. Sure. He was not placed in the board or as even a general manager. He has to work his way through.
That's right.
So he was taken in, he's groomed.
Okay.
There's no guarantee. I don't know. When he will be in the board, he will be,
okay,
if he's ready.
All right.
And that day he will come there. Or else if he's not ready, I believe that somebody else will come into that position.
Yes.
So that is how professionally the organization is run, whether even though it is a family owned business.
Very good. It's a lesson for all of us, because it's not the individual but the position and the organizational future that we're talking about when we talk about succession planning and leadership. Probably the last question I would actually cover for today would be, for HR professionals, a few key things, and I think we discussed quite a few, but a few key things to remember when they get into this game of succession planning. What might that be? A few aspects. So perhaps to start off with,
you should know that you can't do it alone.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay.
So you need to have the sponsorship of the top management.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So you have to start it with your stakeholders.
Right.
And you have to bring in these stakeholders at the right time to the process.
Okay.
So that is what I believe. So, but to start with, yes, you have to have a solid plan.
Okay.
Yeah, that is where the planning is. Then you have to, if the senior management is not convinced about it,
okay,
then you have to convince that it is important, and you have to make a business case.
Okay.
Whatever you HR makes sense only when it makes a business case.
Sure.
So even in succession planning, you have to give the business case to the top management, because that is the only thing that ticks them, right?
Okay.
So HR is not otherwise important. I think it is important for the business, we exist,
sure,
to facilitate the business.
Sure.
I mean, yes, there are a lot of things that humane things that we have to do,
sure,
but that is, yes, to engage employees in the business.
That's right.
Right? And of course, end of the day, we should also not forget that we are a social unit. So
Yes.
we need to, cohesively exist.
That's
so
right.
everything
Yep.
is done to achieve this.
Yes.
So even in succession planning, you get these stakeholders, especially the top management, convince, get their blessings, the buy-in, and then time to time you have to get other stakeholders, such as the candidates, the job holders, and you should have a very transparent process, and also they also should know the business case.
Sure.
Why it is being done. And other thing is the selection of candidates is also very important. More often, the whole organization lose credibility in this process when wrong people are taken into the talent pool also. So that is also very important. You know, it's not just a matter of doing it, you have to have the right tools to identify correct candidates. I would say it is much better if you outsource it, so that like, you know, you're very objective.
Okay.
Right? So these are few things that I see, and it's again, it's a cycle. Plan, do, check.
Yes.
Right? So you,
Constantly.
so it is a cycle. So you plan, then you implement. I mean, okay, you get the blessings, the buy-in, then you have to have strategies to implement succession planning. Like, you know, your recruitment strategy, your development strategy, your retaining strategy also have to align with all this. You know, you can plan, you can develop, but what happens if the candidates leave on the way? So it's very, very important to have all these strategies in place and have proper mechanisms to implement, and of course check. So it is a cycle, it's ongoing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the maze of many topics that need to come together to bring this entire HR profession together. And today we had with us Dilrukshi Kurukulasuriya, General Manager HR, Diesel Motor Engineering PSC. Dilrukshi, we had a good time discussing a very, very valuable topic. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on this program.
Thank you so much, Niroshan. Thank you. I enjoyed talking about succession planning for sure. Thanks.
Thank you very much.